Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Welsh Football Fans podcast. Something special is happening in the Valleys at the moment. Merthyr Town are flying. Paul Michael's side are unbeaten in 6 games in the league and are about to start their FA Cup run tomorrow. So it's never been a better time to get their own prodigal son involved with the podcast. We'll be joined by filmmaker, radio presenter, actor, and all-around football nuthead, Jonny Owen today. We would have had Mark Evans on today as well, but he's had to pull out last minute due to a medical emergency, so we wish him all the best. As always, the Welsh Football Fans podcast is brought to you by our partners, Pure Vans, Nathaniel Cars and Valley Carpets. Let's get stuck into the episode. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to the podcast this morning radio presenter, film director, Merthyr Town legend, Jonny Owen. Bore da, Jonny, you right?
Bore da, good morning. Lovely to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on, mate. And obviously, there's a big old elephant in the room in the world of Welsh football, and it is Merthyr Town. They are flying at the moment. 6 wins out of 6. You can't really fault it, can you?
It's been a fantastic start to the season. It couldn't have gone better, really, could it? And not just that, it's an amazing buzz around the ground and the town. Everybody's sort of like getting on the back of this incredible start, and long may it continue.
Absolutely, and you're right with that feeling around the town, and is getting into the surrounding areas and the valleys, to be honest. Merthyr Town are a very community-orientated club, and as someone who was born and bred in the town and seen the highs and lows of the side over the years, how special is it from a fan's point of view to see this run so far?
Oh, I'm loving it, like everybody else. You know, it is a special club and a special town. It's got incredible history when it comes to football. It's got this sort of unique thing of being a football town in a valleys area dominated by rugby historically for a century. And Welsh historians talk about this. Nobody can explain it, but it's just always been football daft. And I think like when the town sort of feels good about itself is when the team is doing well. There was a time in the mid to late 80s, early 90s, I remember as a boy growing up, I was so lucky. They had one of the best teams, if not the best team in non-league for a few years. They were a magnificent side. They used to beat league clubs regularly in the Welsh Cup. You know, they took on Atalanta famously, and you know, you felt good about the town and yourself when the team did well. So that's why it's so important, and I think that's why people are looking to it and enjoying it so much. It does feel like, you know, when the team does well, the town feels good about itself.
Absolutely, and that mood is being reflected in the wider Welsh football community at the moment. I've never seen the town getting so much coverage in the media, and it is special. When you mentioned the highs in the 80s when you were competing in the conference, the famous Welsh Cup win, European football at Penydarren Park, do you think that, well, obviously European football is a bit of a stretch at the moment, but do you think the conference, the way things are going, is it too early in the season to even suggest that the side can build on and get to the higher levels of the pyramid?
It's funny, I was having the same conversation last night. Everybody can't help talking about it, can they? I mean, I think, you know, it is little steps, no two ways about it. I mean, Paul's done such a fantastic job, the manager there, Paul Michaels, in turning a team that were like sort of Murray-bound. You know, we were relegated 2 years ago, as you all know. We had a reprieve. We were so lucky. The club had been sort of mothballed. We were in this unique situation that, you know, when COVID happened, Wales had different rules and Merthyr were playing in an English league. So they were kind of like, they had dispensation to stay mothballed. So when they came back, they had no team, they had no squad. So they had to start again. So they had a really, really tough season that season. And then last season, sort of Paul, you know, managed to steady the ship a bit. And then this year they've started flying. So that's testimony to people sort of, you know, keeping belief in Merthyr. And I think that's what's given it the extra boost, really, is that we were struggling so badly and the club could have gone bust. You know, it's had recently well-publicised sort of problems financially in the last decade or so. So I think there's a feeling now of, good Lord, we could have lost this. And actually, like, we've got something really special. You know better than anybody on match day. It's fantastic up there. You can have a pint, the atmosphere. If you're young and in your late teens, you can sing now behind the goal. There's terraces. It is quite a unique sort of experience that is like Merthyr is making the most of. And I think, like you said, people who used to support Cardiff and Swansea or get along and they go, wow, this is incredible. You're not sat in a seat. You're not told where to sit. You can have a wander around. You can have a sing-song. You can have a pint. These are all things people love doing at football, and it's gone. It's been taken away, the top tier, certainly. But you can do that at Merthyr. So I love that, and I think that's a big part of it. It's not just a successful team. It's the atmosphere at Penydarren Park, what you can do, what it means to the town, and football at that level does feel more connected. There's no two ways about it. You know, there are no multi-millionaires there. The fans often travel with the team on the bus. there's an amazing closeness between that team and the fans. You can see it every time they score and the way they celebrate. And that's something that's, becoming unique to football. And I think that's what makes Merthyr such an attractive proposition to go and watch at the moment.
That is spot on, to be honest. And Merthyr are in a very, very unique position, being Wales' only non-league club now. Obviously, Wrexham going up last season, but there's a massive difference between the two sides, even before the Hollywood ownership up north. How much do you think that Merthyr's non-league heritage and how unique that matchday experience gets people involved, not only people from who spoke Cardiff and Swansea, but people who are just looking for a new sort of football fix in Wales?
Absolutely. I mean, I actually seen a post from somebody who supported Newport County saying they'd been up recently and loved it. So like you're saying, and also sort of people saying they come from across the border in England to see what it's like in Merthyr. So it's starting to garner that reputation. And you know what? You do end up, with reputations like Bohemians in Dublin or Sao Paulo in Hamburg, where they become a destination football club. And I often say to Mark Evans, the vice chairman, we have long conversations about it. You want Merthyr to end up becoming a destination football club, a club people will travel to see because it's got a very specific atmosphere and culture around it. That's starting to happen already in South Wales. People will go to Merthyr for a very specific experience. And we want to really try and build on that as much as we possibly can, give it that distinctive character and personality. And I think there is a romance around Merthyr. I mean, Wrexham did that brilliantly with their documentary, with all the mining stuff at the top and in the titles and all that. But if anything, Merthyr is probably more famous as a mining industrial capital than anywhere, certainly in Wales, I'd say, because it was the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. I mean, even to this day, the open cast mining produces like half of Britain's coal. I was reading the other day. It's extraordinary. Tricati, that area. This isn't even now. Most of the coal in Britain comes from Merthyr, and nothing is put back into town in relative terms. We've always been a town that's produced so much, had the hardest, most backbreaking work you can do in iron foundries, steelworks and pits. Still a tough place to live, yet nothing goes back into the town. So there's a romance in the story of the people still being there, still fighting, still saying we're here, this is the football club, this is what in Merthyr. People just off the top of my head, like Julian MacDonald, who's a world famous designer who went to the same school as me. So there's something in the people that adds to the story, I think. And I think that's what's happened. I found where people have said to me, and like you just said, it's like dominating the press for a club of its size. It is a fascinating story because Merthyr does seem like a place that almost you can't imagine existing anymore, with the accent, where it is, the people. We are sort of like a relic of an industrial age that still exists in this valley with this football club. And I think that's what people find so interesting.
It is very, very interesting. That is a brilliant way to put it, to be honest. I'd say that Merthyr are necessarily like a commodity. They are the biggest valleys. And I think for other people from the valleys, that is a big pull factor as well. Like, certainly, I've there myself. I'm from Kevin England. That's 12 miles down the road from Merthyr. It's the same distance down the south to Cardiff than it is up north to Merthyr. But there's a much more of an appeal for me to go up to Penydarren Park than it would be the City Stadium. And
no, there's a thing we say in Merthyr, which is a bit cheeky, but we can't help it. We call ourselves the capital of the valleys, because it is the biggest town in the valleys and all that kind of thing, So we always sort of add that little sort of glint that Merthyr tends to be a place people come to for a night out, to watch the football team and that kind of thing. And I grew up very much watching Merthyr and Cardiff. That's what I did. We all did. Merthyr were like the non-league team, Cardiff were the league team, and the crossover was huge, and it still is. I still would say the town is a good 80-90% Cardiff. There's Swansea City fans in Merthyr now, which is an extraordinary thing for me. But there is, Alex Ashman, our mate, he supports Swansea, and there's lads who do fine. But we all grew up watching Merthyr and Cardiff, and the crossover was huge, and it still is. I think what Merthyr gets is a lot of boys from the valleys and some boys from Cardiff who come up and watch Merthyr and sort of like cross. And we get people up from Swansea as well now and things like that. And I think, we just touched on it. It's the unique experience of coming to Merthyr. It's this like all those things I was talking about: terracing, singing, being able to stand by your mates. Just that saying in itself, that phrase, you can stand by your mate and sing. That's massive in football terms, because if you're sat in a seat and you have to sit by somebody you don't know so well, it does change the dynamic of how you can sing and how you can get behind it. Now, you've seen in Merthyr these extraordinary sort of videos already away from home and home of all the fans packed in behind the goal, home and away, and going crazy when Merthyr scored. There was a brilliant one from the weekend of a lad who jumped up when they scored the penalty. And it just looks fantastic. So if you're a 16-year-old kid growing up in the valleys, where are you going to go? Are you going to go to Cardiff and Swansea, where you're told to sit and whatever? Or are you going to go to Merthyr, where they're mates, where you can have a pint? Right, if you're 16, you're not supposed to, but, you know, if you're 18, say you can have a pint, you can have a sing-song, and you can watch some football. And I think that's, well, I know that's what's happening. I think a lot of young lads are going, it's great fun up here to get along and to act in a way that they've seen everybody behaving 30, 40 years ago on the terraces, you know, singing, atmosphere, and they can do that in Merthyr now. And I think that's become, like I said, a very attractive thing.
Spot on, absolutely. And touching onto that video you mentioned there about that lad jumping onto the goalpost and everything.
Yeah.
Hate to break it to you, that was me.
Was it you?
The green pen on, yeah, that was me.
Well, there's some beautiful synchronicity, because I was out yesterday in London in Soho, and my mate was talking. He's a West Ham fan. He went, "Oh, I seen that video you put up." He said, "I was laughing at that lad who jumped up." So I said, "Well, I know who it is now."
It was somebody who Swindon was, to be fair, and it is just the beauty of what's happening at Merthyr at the moment. Having 3 coaches, I think, 2 minibuses and 1 bus heading down there.
A train. Loads of boys went up on the train, little train.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Had a little wander around Swindon and went to the game.
Jesus.
Fair play to him.
It was a superb day, to be fair. It was a bit of chaos with the transport. Our bus was about an hour and something late. Most of us ended up in the park there waiting. We had all the kit with us. We had the balls. We had most of the equipment. So it was ropey trying to get there. But it's non-league football for you, isn't it? That's the beauty of it. You can all have a laugh about that.
You know, it becomes part of the experience. I grew up, you know, watching Merthyr, the great team of the mid-80s, away in non-league, you know, a few buses, the chaos of it, no segregation in those days. So you'd play up in Birmingham, and like a lot of Birmingham City fans, Zulus would turn up. You'd be like, oh my God. So that was like part of going away with non-league. We used to say it was more dangerous to watch Merthyr than anybody, because you never know who's going to be at the ground you arrived in, because we had a bit of a reputation for taking fans as well. You know, the home fans waiting for us knew it would be a bit of a day where you could sing at each other and it'd be a good atmosphere. So all those things were a big part of growing up. And they're all the things we reminisce about now with our friends when we sit down with them. And they're the things you reminisce about when you're my age. You'll be, remember when we scored the goal, when I jumped on the goals? It's what makes football such a great experience, you know, and I'm all for it, me.
Yes, absolutely. And Merthyr, we've already touched upon it already. It is a very old school feel to it, and a new generation, as well as people from your age and a bit younger, are making new memories at the club this season. And a lot of it has come down to Penydarren Park hasn't changed for years necessarily, barring the new clubhouse and everything. You've got the modern facilities there, which are brilliant. They're used every day for the week. The ground itself is very much the same as it was in the 80s and the 90s. And how much do you think Penydarren Park itself has like an impact on Merthyr's identity and a big pull factor of away fans even coming to the ground as well? I'd say that Merthyr is the biggest trip for people in the Southern League at the moment.
Yeah, I said it earlier on, and you become a destination club. You become a club people want to go and see and, tick off their list and stuff. And it is a unique experience. It's a wonderful little ground because, like you're saying, it's a brilliant sort of amalgamation of all these things, old terracing with this amazing food that, always goes viral. That's that famous shot of the cob sausage and chips and curry sauce. Yes. But also behind the goal is where all the sort of like younger kids go and they can have a sing-song. But the grandstand's brilliant if you're a little bit older and you do want to sit down. The facilities are fantastic. It is great. Everybody that goes there goes, wow, this is amazing. I think it's just got a great, unique combination of all those things. It feels old school, but yet it's really modern. So there's like they're beautiful. It's almost like, the way I would describe it is like, it's like a beautiful modern Welsh cottage. On the outside, you go, oh my God, this is an old fashioned Welsh cottage with, brickwork. And you go inside and it's got all modern conveniences. It's a beautiful modern kitchen and living room. That's Merthyr. You go there and you think, this looks like a beautiful traditional old football ground. You get inside and it's completely modern. And I think that's why it's got it so right and why it's become so popular for people to go there.
That I've never heard anyone describe a football stadium like a Welsh cottage before, but my days going forward, I think that is superb. And of course, the name Penydarren Park's been in the news over the last week, down to yourself, really. Can you touch on why that is?
Yeah, I mean, I've got involved in Merthyr in the sense of sponsoring the shirt with our production company, Build Your Own Films, me and Vicky. We're very lucky that the company's been, successful, so we're able to do that. But then what happened was I got a doctorate basically from Swansea University, and I was being interviewed by Radio Wales. And at the end, they said to me, "Any more ambitions?" Like as if I was 77 years of age. So as a laugh, I went, "Oh, you know what? I'd love to buy Merthyr and take him to the Premier League." Ha ha ha. Well, of course, we got picked up seriously, as if I was like being, serious. So my missus gave me a bit of a bollock, and she was like, "Why do you mess around like that? You know they'll pick it up and report it as if you're serious." I was like, doesn't matter. So anyway, I was getting a bit of shit on message boards. People going, "Who do you think he is, Ryan Reynolds?" and all that. I was like, no, I don't. I was in Nuts and Bolts. He's in Deadpool. There's a difference. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, I was a bit like, whatever. But then what happened was, weirdly, I get an email. My mate Anthony Lewis, who was in school with me, he's a Gerrig boy, primary school as well, slipped into my DMs, as they say, and he went, "Look, I've done pretty well for myself in Australia," and he's a really talented lad. He said, "I'd love to get involved with the Martyrs as well." So I said, okay. So I had a chat to the club, and I said, "What about if we do this? We will donate the money that used to cost to sponsor the ground, but we will donate it. So it's not a sponsorship, it's donate. So it keeps its name, Penydarren Park. And the money you can do with what you want. It's a donation." Because when I first started sponsoring the team top, I noticed like sometimes, because we didn't start well that season, people would message me, "What's going on, John? What's going on?" I was like, "I only sponsor the top. I don't pick the team." Do you know what I mean? So I was a bit like, this is a donation. We're handing this to the club. The people in the club will do it brilliantly. They will use the money however they want. And that's what we've done. So it's a donation that's gone to the team, which is the cost of what it would have cost to sponsor Penydarren Park, but it stays as Penydarren Park and the team can use it how they want. That's what we did.
A quick intermission for you all, just to give you some exciting news in the world of Welsh football fans. We're up for two categories in this year's Football Content Awards. Welsh football fans are running for Best in Socials, and I myself is up for Best Influencer. Who would have thought, eh? So if you want to give us a vote, head over to footballcontentawards.com/vote and get us to the final. Get me in a suit. I haven't worn a suit since my prom, and that was a horrible night. So I need to sort of redeem myself now. Get me looking dapper. Let's get some silverware behind us. Happy days. Back to the episode. And I think every football fan has seen what you've done with you and Anthony, and it's like, wow. It is just the best thing for the club to keep the heritage there. It's going to last for newer generations. And I remember a few years ago when like an e-cigarette companies took a naming rights. Massive stink about it, and rightfully so. I think football's one of the biggest issues in modern football is protecting heritage. Obviously, you were very, very much outspoken when Cardiff City changed their shirt colour a few years ago, and rightfully so. And I think one of the most poignant things that come out of that was your appearance on Soccer AM, and it is something that hasn't necessarily changed in the years since. You've seen plenty of clubs who have folded, like Bolton, it nearly happened to them. Bury, obviously, had their grave, and now we're rising up again. I think the lower you go down the football pyramid, there's a lot of history there that simply isn't protected. And with Merthyr's sudden rise now, I think everybody needs to be keeping that heritage there. And you as a fan are doing that off your own back. And I think every supporter on the terraces does their best to. The likes of Mark Evans, any of the Dial M boys, it is something you just take pride in as your football club at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with every word you say. It's a massive part of your identity, who you are, your history, how you grow up. The Cardiff City thing was a real lesson, I think, in the sense that I got so many close friends who've never gone back, really, and they've lost them forever. And that, that's how important it is to people. You keep, your colours, your heritage, your history, your badge, you as much as you can, your ground, I argue, that there should be certain things protected. You can't knock down Shakespeare's cottage in Stratford because it was Shakespeare's cottage. It's a fair point. So why are you able to sort of change the colours of a sporting team where they've been that colour for 150 years and people have been buried in their tops? They've had on their graves stone the badge. These are things that are really, really important to people. And I think because football is predominantly a working class sport, or it's a wash with money now, it doesn't tend to have those same protections that it would have if it was, say, horse racing or something like that. And I think it's starting to happen now. People are much more aware of what happens and how important it is to people. And, I think over time, it'll become more and more protected. I think the difficulty in football tends to be that we move grounds a lot because, for whatever reason, you have to get sort of, fans in a certain way. You have to make money hospitality-wise, commercially. So I get it. It's things like that happen all the time. But I think fundamentally very simple things. Like if you got a committee together that said, right, this is the colour of the club home colours, this is the fundamentals of the badge, and you can never touch that. I think the vast majority of football fans, you have a voting system with fans. I think the vast majority of fans would say, if you're Chelsea, we'll always play in this specific blue, and we'll always have a lion on the badge. I think the vast majority of fans will agree on something, and once that's enshrined, that can become protected forever. That was my sort of argument and my sort of experience coming out of it. Now, in all fairness to Cardiff, they did go back to blue. They're blue again now and all the rest of it. But the damage was quite considerable, I felt, at the time, and the fallout has meant that there are certain people that have never gone back, and I wouldn't want that to ever happen again to any football club, really, because it was such a shame.
Yes, absolutely. And be having fan representation, really, no matter where a football club plays, that is vital. And one thing that Merthyr does have and has done since the club became Merthyr Town in 2010 is the fan ownership system. How important is that for any club? There's a fair few all over the world who have fan ownership now, but how important is it for Merthyr in particular to have fan ownership and the impact it has on the club going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, fan ownership. It's very, very good in some respects, because obviously, like Merthyr, for argument's sake, you can't operate at a loss. You have to make sure that the stability of the club exists, and I'm all for that. The way you can get caught in a bit of a Groundhog Day was what happened to Wrexham, where you kind of end up in the same position for a decade, because as soon as you get a decent player, Tranmere or Stockport come in for him, and you can't spend that extra £100 to keep him. That's where the problems start as you go up the leagues. I think the owners of Wrexham have kind of come in, have done a fantastic job. Rob and Ryan. I can't speak more highly of what's happened there. And what they've done, which is where I agree with you, is maybe there's a model which is like sort of a hybrid, where you get certain people there that can put some money in and financially, but there's always fan representation at board level. And I work at Nottingham Forest, and the chairman who just left, Nick Randall, KC, who's a top guy. He's worked really hard at getting a board of fans, together that can sort of represent the fans' views on things. They've got a really, really strong relationship with the Supporters Trust at Forest. I think Wrexham has still got the same. So they're always listening about prices and all those kind of things, and sponsorship, and who we're going to go with. And I do think there's a model there which can be a combination of both. Possibly somebody gets voted on a board, a board of 6, somebody who's a fan, voted on for 2 years, once every 2 years, and then they have a vote or a say where they represent the Supporters Trust. There's definitely something there that can be worked out, I think, where there's fan representation at board level.
Yeah, definitely. And with the town and everything as well, anyone can become an owner. And
yeah,
I am yet to do, and it's something I will get around to doing ways to go in a season. Never been a better time to get on it, to be honest. But obviously, is a very famous quote by Jock Stein, which everyone has seen by now, being a football fan, and that is, football without fans is nothing. No matter where your club is in the pyramid, how important is that statement, and how do you think that's been reflected by the mood in Merthyr this season?
Yeah, I mean, it sums it up. The great Jock Stein, who played internationally against Merthyr, incredibly. There's a photograph of him playing against Merthyr, so there's a connection with Merthyr and Jock Stein. And what he said was, football without fans is nothing. You can have a very ordinary game, but it becomes a world-class game with fans there, because they add that element of the atmosphere. So the saying, the entirety of the saying is even better. And what he's saying is it can actually enhance a game. You know what I mean? It can make an ordinary game a great game. And he's right. We've seen that with Merthyr. I think one of the big things in Merthyr this year that I was talking to Les, the chairman, Les Barlow, who's done a great job. And he's like, you know what? Those lads behind the goals, they don't half make a difference. They suck the ball in. That very late goal they scored on a Tuesday night, where everybody was talking about it, nearly 1,000 up the park on a Tuesday night. Do you know what I mean? Extraordinary. They make a massive difference, the fans. Travelling to Swindon, I think they had about 300, 400 fans there in a 400 crowd. I think Swindon had, bless them, had about 12 fans there. The rest of Merthyr, those things make a difference if you're a player. There's no doubt about it. Wherever Merthyr go now, those players know they're going to get a decent crowd, home and away. And I think that just makes it massive. It's no coincidence that in life, the most successful football teams of the last century have generally been the most supported, like Manchester United, Liverpool. It makes a difference, And I think Merthyr kind of like to be seen as a well-supported team. If they keep going as they are, I'd like us to be the best supported team in that league this year, if we can, especially if we start staying in the promotion places. And I think that can happen. I said this in an interview last week. Last year's FA Cup, the final round before the first round proper qualifying was a real eye-opener for me in the sense of I walked up from town, I walked up through Pontmoras, and it was busy, it was packed. I thought, God, this is interesting. We got to the ground and we went up a bit early. We were lucky. We got up there by about 1 o'clock and there was a massive queue. So we get in by about 1:20 and it gets to about 2:15 and I'm upstairs and they're looking after me at the club. They've been brilliant. And somebody went, look at this, John. And I went out into the side of the stand there, the Lynn Jones stand, where you can see down towards the park view, down towards Brecon Road, and the queue went right the way down. And people were going, we're going to have to delay the kickoff. And it was extraordinary. And I thought to myself, there you go. If you get it right up here, it'll be busy. People will come to watch it. And this is what's happening now this season. People can see the manager, the team, everybody that works there is getting it right. It's happening. They're at the top of the league. They've had a perfect start. They couldn't have had a better start. So people will start to watch them. But that was my moment. That was my road to Damascus moment. I thought, oh my God. I thought, Merthyr have got the potential to be a successful football club on the back of their support. And I know everybody quotes them, but Burnley are a fantastic example of a town that absolutely supports that football club. And their population and Merthyr's population is not a million miles apart. And certainly the borough population of Merthyr is certainly strong enough to support at least what I used to call a GM Vauxhall or a National League team. And possibly, if we get into the league, which would be a dream situation. We were there 100 years ago. And economics dictated that, it was too difficult. We had a dreadful depression in the South Wales valleys in the 20s, and people, had to choose between eating or watching a football match. Well, you're going to choose to feed your kids. But there's amazing stories I heard from my grandfather about my great-grandfather about thousands of people standing outside the ground to listen to the results because they couldn't afford to go in, and there was like crowds of 15 inside and like 2,000 or 3,000 people standing outside. So it's always been there. And I think, if we can keep prices reasonable and make it this really attractive thing, then, you can get people up there. And all it means is, I kept saying this, the more you go, it'll be a little bit more money for the manager to spend. Then you can get better players. And it's kind of like a self-fulfilling thing. You can end up moving up the league, and that can happen. And you can directly influence that by just getting along to watch Merthyr. Simple as that.
That's absolutely spot on. And it just fills you with optimism, doesn't it? That cup run last season seemed to be the turning point for where we are in the present. I was up there. I'm fairly sure I interviewed you before that game, and it never saw the light. Like that, it was just, I done it off my phone. I was just buzzing for the game, to be honest. And it was paid off in the end. That was a superb result. And first round proper for the first time was Merthyr Town. And it begins again tomorrow. It's the first round qualifiers again. And obviously, cup football is special. And one of Merthyr's big pull factors is competing in the FA Cup. And that run last season shows that they can go all the way to get into the big teams. Obviously, Buxton wasn't necessarily the best draw, but it was still a superb day for those who went. What would you say to not only Merthyr fans, but a neutral football fan who wants to get a taste of FA Cup football before it enters the big stage of the competition?
Yeah, I'd say to go up. It was a brilliant last year. I mean, it took a few hundred to Buxton. I took a minibus from Nottingham with all my Nottingham mates, and they were like, oh, look at this support. I mean, took over the town. The pubs were full of Merthyr. It was amazing. And if they'd won that and they started well, they were really unlucky that match. We'd have had to switch town the next round. We'd have been playing a team that's won what they now call the Europa Cup. That's how close you can get to sort of, to those kinds of teams. So it's just always there, that incentive. And I'd say to anybody, look, if you get up to watch Merthyr this weekend, I can guarantee you one thing, right? It'll be a really good laugh. You'll hear some singing. You can have a pint if you want it. You can have some great food. You can watch some football, and you'll be supporting a club that's fan-owned, and the money goes directly back to the club. The players are vast majority working class. That's what they do. They love football. They play it for the love of it. Merthyr players aren't paid anywhere near as well as the League of Wales players. So we've got a lot of players there who play because of the crowds. The manager would say this. One of his USPs for Merthyr, when he sits down and interviews them, he'd say, look, you can earn more money going to X, Y, and Z, just down the valley there or whatever. But if you play for Merthyr, you play for a football club that'll have fans home and away watching you. Proper fans as well. It's a big, big thing. And, as much as I agree that there needs to be a League of Wales, and I support them, and I try to get along, and I got mates who go as well. Merthyr is something unique and different, and it always has been. And we have to embrace that uniqueness and differenceness. That's our point. That's what Merthyr are. We have been for like a century. After the Second World War, we had the best team in non-league. We just did. We won the Southern League a few years running. It was a voting system then to get in the Football League. We were always voted against by the other Welsh clubs because they thought we'd take support off them. So that was their view. But the irony was we were getting 14,000, 15,000 for some games. That was what the town was getting then. And then we kind of went into a little bit of a sort of decline in the 60s and 70s. But even in the 70s, we could still produce Gordon Davis, who's now Fulham's ambassador. He's still arguably the most popular ever player. They call him Ivor. So Merthyr's always produced people like that. And then, of course, in the mid-80s, this incredible thing happened where I was 15, 16, and we suddenly had arguably the best team in non-league again, and players like Kevin Rogers, who came back, who was, patently playing well below the standard that he could play at. He'd come from Birmingham and Aston Villa and Wrexham, as they were then, and kind of went to his hometown because he could see something was happening. And I think that's what we can do in the end. If we become a place where players want to play because of the support, because they know they're going to play in front of a few thousand people every weekend, you'll get them. You'll get that tier of players that exist in South Wales that can get us up through the leagues. That's my hope. Anyway, I'm hoping that the more fans we get, the more money we get in the pot, we can start cherry picking the best players in non-league from South Wales, what we did in the late 80s, and then we start moving up the leagues.
Absolutely, and there is just so much optimism surrounding the club at the moment.
Yeah.
People can reminisce about the highs of the 80s. It does seem like it's time for a new generation to experience that. There's certainly, the football culture is there now, and it is having a major, major boom. And you see it on the terraces, you see in similar fashion as to what was worn when you were going there at 15, 16. Yeah. I think people around my age want to taste that now, and the club is certainly doing their best to provide it, isn't they?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I've worked at Forest the last 5 or 6 years, and there was a really interesting dynamic developed. Forest had this extraordinary football team in the late 70s that won European Cups under Brian Clough. They were the best team, domestic team, arguably in the world. They were amazing. And then there was this generation that experienced that. And I did a film about it, and that's why Forest were world famous. And then I noticed the last few years there was a younger generation came through who were a bit like, well, can we have that? As much as we love that, we want to experience something similar as well. And that's what happens. Steve Cooper comes in, and there's this almost like magic carpet ride of them going up that season and then staying up last year. And the atmosphere at the City Ground is phenomenal. Everybody sort of says it's arguably the best atmosphere in the Premier League at the moment. And I think that's on the back of a new generation going, well, we want to create what happened previously. And I can see that happening in Merthyr. There's a young generation going, oh, we want what you had in the late 80s, where you used to travel away and or go across the country. They want to experience that as well, and I don't blame them, because we had that in the 80s about the post-war team. My father was always talking about Bill Hullett, Shenkin Powell. I can name them. He's talking about these players, who were like, they were the best Merthyr players ever. But then in the late 80s, he started saying, I think Dai Webley is as good, if not better than him. I think Kerry Williams is brilliant. I think Kevin Rogers. They started replacing those names, and that's why I love Kevin Rogers, the King. He was always my favourite player. He said, look, we won the first 8 games of the season, the great Merthyr team. And he was like, I'd love the new team to break that record. He was like, I want them to. I'm a Merthyr boy. He's an ambassador for the club. And he's like, I want us to break those records. I want to create it again. And I feel that is happening in Merthyr, where the younger generation are going, well, can we do what you lot used to do, where you travel the country singing and watching this great football team? Can we do the same? And I'm like, absolutely, you should. You should be encouraged to do that. And that's why I love Les's attitude. He was going like, those, boisterous fans behind the goals, they're making it at the moment. We want to encourage that, if anything. And I thought to myself, good for you, Les, and good for the club.
Absolutely. And I think that just about wraps us up, to be honest, today.
No,
plenty to look forward to for the rest of the season. I'm obviously going to wish the town all the best. And I hope we see Penydarren at some point this year.
Are you going up Saturday? When are you going up next?
Oh, I'll be up tomorrow, yeah.
Tomorrow? Yeah, tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm in Chelsea tomorrow. I got to go with Forest tomorrow. But I'm definitely coming down end of September for a home game. So, and I'm hoping to do as many as, quite a few this year if I can. So, listen, if we go up and we get, I don't know which league we'll go up to, the north or the south. I hope it's the north, because I can go to loads of week that way, but we'll see.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Very welcome. Lovely. Good luck. Ciao, man.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you to Jonny for coming on today's episode. It is always a pleasure to talk football with our man. He just gets it, doesn't he? He knows the culture. He knows the score. And it don't take a genius to work out that there's a lot of excitement around Merthyr Town at the moment. Let's try and get a Penydarren Park either tomorrow for the FA Cup or anytime throughout the season, and come and see what the fuss is for yourself. I'm sure you'll love it. And if you can't take anything from today's episode, Jonny is just as buzzing as anyone is, to be honest. As always, the Welsh Football Fans podcast is brought to you by Pure Vans, Nathaniel Cars and Valley Carpets. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your continued support on the socials and our website. Make sure you're checking out our articles. Make sure you're across all of our socials. And we'll see you soon for episode 4. Diolch yn fawr.